Good day, learners. This is once again Teacher Rex for English 7 of Calamba City Science Integrated School. Welcome to our new learning episode, Week 6. When describing something, we often resort to making comparisons to establish a clearer idea of what we are trying to describe or explain. There are many types of comparisons in the English language, including the use of figures of speech like simile and metaphor. Can you still recall the two figures of speech that I have mentioned? This lesson focuses on the use of other rhetorical device like analogy in comparing things in order to describe or make a point. What can you say about a tree? Can a tree be associated to life? Let's find it out. Our lesson for today is analogy. Comparing objects or ideas is a common practice, especially when writing. While there are many types of comparisons that one can make through usual figures of speech like simile and metaphor, there are also literary techniques or devices that can show and provide a more detailed comparison of things and ideas. One example of these techniques is the use of analogy. So, what is an analogy? An analogy is a literary technique that involves comparison of how two things are alike, but with the ultimate goal of making point about this comparison. Although often quite similar or related with simile and metaphor, ladies and gentlemen, an analogy is not a figure of speech. It is a rhetorical device. Again, rhetorical device that is used to make rational arguments and support ideas by showing connections and comparisons between unlike things. The main function of analogy is not just to show, but also to explain or justify. Meanwhile, figures of speech like simile or metaphor only aim to show without providing clear descriptions or explanations. As such, analogy is more complex in nature than figures of speech. Take a look at how simile, metaphor, and analogy differ from each other through these examples. A while ago, I asked you if we can associate tree with life or life with tree. Let's see. If it's a simile, it will go as life is like a tree. See that? We use like to join two unlike things, which are life and tree. So this is an indirect comparison, whereas metaphor is a direct comparison of two unlike objects, such as life and tree. So in metaphor, we say life is a tree. Meanwhile, in analogy, it will go as life is just like a tree. It starts from a seedling that grows into a full-grown tree that has trunk and branches that make itself strong and bears wonderful fruits. You see the vivid and the detailed description of the comparison between life and the tree. The comparison is very well detailed and well established. Now, moving on, there are two types of analogies, starting with the first one, analogies that identify identical relationships. What do we mean by this? This type of analogy takes the form of A is to B as C is to D, and is often used to directly illustrate similar relationships between two pairs of words, often for the purpose of logical argument. Example, English is to language, as mathematics is to arithmetic. Whereas the second type is analogies that identify shared abstraction. What do we mean by identifying shared abstraction? This form of analogy compares two things or concepts that are technically unrelated in order to establish connection between a characteristic that they share. This type is commonly useful in writing because it can make abstract ideas and concepts more for instance, what soldiers do for the country, white blood cells do for the body. In a given example, the abstract concept of how white blood cells function in the body is made clear by explaining that they protect everything inside, like how soldiers perform their sworn duty to protect their country. To wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen, in writing, analogies play the function of making abstract concepts more concrete, adding depth and feeling to an image, and describing and making a point to establish an argument. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for week 6. This has been Rex J. Bibal, your teacher for English 7 from Calamba City Science Integrated School. See you on the next learning episode.